everyone. I'm Amy Caruso. I'm the head of collateral initiatives at ISDA, and I am delighted to be hosting this webinar regarding AI and the common domain model. Now, I am joined by my colleague Vernon Alden Smith, who is a director here at ISDA as well, and the collateral team. He and I are the team, so you got us both. And also Paul Hans, who is the Chief Technology Officer of DRS and Parallel 51. Now, before we get started, I'll go over just a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. All the attendees will be muted, but that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. So please use the Q&A box for any types of questions. Technology questions will be handled by our colleague Matt Panna, and content questions we'll answer towards the end of the webinar. And if you ask a question and we don't have enough time, or if it's very specific to your firm, we will be sure to get back to you. So don't be shy about asking questions. Now, today we're going to be discussing how the common domain model can be used by technology providers and also their clients to convert legacy PDF, credit support annex documents, or credit support deeds, it could be either one, into digitized clauses. So first, Vernon, can you take us through what is the common domain model? We might have some newbies on the call today that are just learning about this open source data model. And how has it come from a great idea from years ago to reality now?
So I'll just go to our first slide that kind of gives us an overview of what the CDM is. So the common domain model, or CDM, is a standardized machine readable and machine executable data model that represents financial products, trades in those products, and life cycle events of those products, including collateral agreements, and also how we represent collateral assets for eligibility terms and other collateral processes. So you can kind of think of it as a data dictionary of common standards. So what is it for? So the development of the CDM in the financial industry, it basically promotes transparency, efficiency, and innovation, and can bring significant benefits to market participants and users and regulators. So what the CDM enables us to do is provide interoperability between systems and services to transfer data related to a CSA more efficiently using standard terms, removing the burden of setting up connections and different systems in entities, and basically maintaining different forms of business logic and translations. So it takes away a lot of that friction and allows this data to be transferred more accurately and securely. So the CDM will not only do that, it will speed up the development of new solutions for the market by allowing providers to focus on what they specialize in rather than requiring them to interpret and represent market events and processes individually. And the CDM can also be used to increase automation in collateral management processes to improve efficiency, reduce the time it takes to get client relationships up and running and onboarded, and cut operational and liquidity risks. Now, this slide kind of shows you what the CDM is made up of. I know we're talking about collateral use cases, in particular legal agreements today, but the model already also covers products, events on those products, digital regulatory reporting, reference data, and other mapping to common standards that are already in place, such as FIX, FPML, and ISO 20022. And just to highlight at the bottom there, the CDM is not software or an application in and of itself, but it can be implemented within one and built into services and data structures that are in your institutions already. So just a little bit about the, how the CDM has evolved and the history. ISDA started the CDM around 2017, but as it developed further in a couple of years' time, ISLA and ICMA also joined the CDM development. And the governance structure needed to change. And a couple of years ago, the CDM was moved to FINOS, which is the FinTech Open Source Foundation, that allows an overall governance structure for many institutions and trade associations to all contribute and maintain the CDM. As you're probably aware, collateral processes do cross over naturally into the different products, whether it's securities lending, repo, or OTC derivatives. So there's many areas of collateral management where processes are similar, where common data structures can help in all these different markets. So I think just to highlight some of the challenges in collateral management, we're all aware that collateral management sits amongst many different areas within an organization internally. So collateral management feeds in from legal, from risk, front office, and deliver information back and forth, and also interact with a lot of different technology and services and products. And obviously externally as well, collateral management needs to communicate with other institutions such as service providers and vendors, other counterparties, custodians, negotiation platforms, administrators, and data providers. So we can all see where using standard data can really help the flow of this information. And I think the current problem we have is a lack of industry standards where every participant has implemented their own version of how they represent the CSA or eligible collateral. We've lost that interoperability opportunity between these solutions, and the CDM can offer that. So the CDM will allow us to move away from maintaining all these different forms of business logic, and away from the friction of all the different reconciliation issues that we commonly experience in day-to-day operations. And many different areas of collateral management process are listed there where data standards can help. And I think this has all been amplified by regulatory change in recent years, where we now have to post more margin for initial margin as well as VM, and other processes have been impacted by a lot of these regulations. So margin call volumes have increased significantly, and things we need to do on a daily basis to maintain all of these different regulatory reforms is growing quite a lot.
Great, Vernon. Well, thank you for that overview. And now, Paul, we'd like to hear a little bit more about your firm, your involvement with CDM, bit of a historical term. I mean, Vernon gave us the history of CDM overall, but can you share, how did DRS and Parallel 51 get involved with CDM to date?
Thanks, Amy. So we first heard about the CDM probably coming up to about 2 years ago now. Michael Eaton, who is the product owner of the application, he's one of the directors at DRS, has been joining the working groups quite a lot and has realized quite quickly that it was a technical solution that needed to be implemented inside a technical framework. When he approached me and sort of said, we need to start putting this stuff in place, so we need to start looking at it and thinking about it, that was the kind of the initial jump in point. We didn't particularly move with it. We kept an eye on it. We kept on sort of joining the working groups and seeing what was going on. And it wasn't until about January of this year, when they had the CDM showcase in London, that we had a bit more of an right, okay, so this is now a lot more important and a lot more of a thing that we need to get working into. In parallel to that, our company, Parallel 51, had been developing a software application called ARC51, which was very much to do with data digitization. So almost the first step of getting data from a PDF document into a digital format, something that's very tricky intrinsically to get budget or time for. And it was a really obvious mesh that we could go, okay, so if someone wants to actually extract this document to move it further downstream, we're going to have to interact with other systems, and it looked like the CDM was the perfect one to do so. So that was the point. We said, okay, let's actually start having conversations, start working in, and I have now been involved with quite a few different little bits and pieces with the CDM recently, which is very exciting.
A little bit more about how do you think it's going to be beneficial to not only your firm, but your clients? What's the value proposition you think working with CDM will bring?
So I think that the CDM concept it's not a new thing, right? It's not a new idea. The idea of having a system talking to another system is as old as we've had multiple systems in place. The issue that you've got is that in the past, particularly in the finance world, we've had X systems, and when we've had to have X minus one different ways of connecting between them. And when you've got two systems and you build that one connector, that's pretty much the same amount of work you'd have to do to generate a kind of a CDM mapping in the first instance. The real benefit and the real advantage comes when you have more than those two. So when you want to go downstream and you want to interact and you want multiple systems to talk to each other, they all just need to be able to speak one language, and that one language is the CDM. So they all need to just have this common domain model to allow themselves to put the stuff in place, so that then the communication layer only has to be built once. And the idea being that if everyone builds this one universal communication layer once, what that means is that everyone can do things. It means that the data can be passed a lot easier between different systems, and it also really encourages competition. So on a client-side basis, at the moment, if your data is in a system, it can be a real pain and a real mountain to climb to get your data out of a system to put it somewhere else. And a lot of the times that's been sort of seen as almost be a competitive hurdle to get over. Everyone adopting the CDM will mean that the competition is a lot more based on what you can actually offer and for the clients is what your providers can give you, rather than our providers have got all of our data already, so we might as well stay with them. And that's it. That's going to be a huge driving factor in pushing innovation and pushing effectively just how good the products actually are that you can use upwards into the stratosphere.
Thank you, Paul. That's a great way of summarizing how if we all say things in a common way, I mean, Vernon and I weren't around when it was named, but it is very, very logical for the common domain model to be named just that. So let's look at the big picture for just a few more minutes. And Vernon, can you start us off with how can firms use document data from different sources and the CDM as part of their contract lifecycle management strategy? And then Paul will give us a demo of how he and his firm can fit into this bigger picture.
Sure, thank you, Amy. So before I get into the details on this slide, just to highlight what the CDM currently covers, obviously there's been many years of work in developing the data related to the CSA, for example. And we do have model coverage for quite a number of CSAs. There's about 25 initial margin agreements, new generation documents. There are VM CSAs covering about 5 different versions on the 2016 vintage. And we're currently working on the legacy 94-95 CSA. That's in development and should be completed by the end of this year. So there's much coverage in the model spanning many different versions of CSAs, because we know that different ones are negotiated for different purposes. We also have coverage of eligible collateral, covering assets, issuers, maturity profiles, agency ratings, concentration limits and haircuts, and margin call data and cash collateral interest terms and processes. So the model has quite a lot of content and foundations to work with. For the documentation use case in particular, I just want to highlight a couple of use cases on this slide here. So there can be many ways. Newly negotiated documents in platforms such as ISDA Create can be digitized as CDM. And this is in place at the moment. In production, there are currently 10 versions of IM CSAs that can be imported from the ISDA Create platform as CDM data. There's also hard copy, unstructured soft copy data, which is what Paul's going to discuss today, where artificial intelligence can read and extract key information from documents, use that data, convert it into CDM, into that standard structure, and that can be obviously transferred more easily into systems. And there's also vendor solutions that can create, mapping environments that allow CDM data to be consumed into their platforms and produced to be sent out of their platforms and solutions. There are also production use cases of that available today as well, and more the integration work that is going on as well. And I think on this slide, it shows you how institutions can more freely exchange standard information between one another, all the different areas of the ecosystem there. And there's many use cases and benefits that are listed there, and there's probably others that you may be thinking of that enable us to bring more efficiency to those processes within the markets. Now, just a little bit about how the CDM is structured and how this work was put together. Obviously, the CSA itself is quite a number of pages, I think an average 20 to 30 pages of legal text and information. All this information actually operationally does things on a daily basis in collateral management systems, and in events of default, you need to reference some of this data. The CDM can structure all that information and all those outcomes of the different clauses in a common way as data terms, data types and attributes. also, we're not looking to digitize the entire legal text of that document. It's only the key operational information that we require. Now, the CDM, once we build the high-level structures of how we represent legal agreements, such as counterparty information, base currency, common information like minimum transfer amount and thresholds that are in a lot of collateral agreements, we can start to build and add on more agreement types more easily because these structures are quite common. And the example at the bottom here kind of just shows you how a paper version of a document, which still exists and still will exist, but can be converted into standard code that can be more easily consumed and used by systems and solutions. And just to show you some examples of what this data looks like, I have some extracts. These are data extracts in a JSON format. And these are taken from ISDA Create Test Pack, but the CDM data would look identical. It has the key information here in a structured way, your agreement date, your name of your agreement, your year and your governing law, for example, your contractual party information. And just to call out a few other key bits of information, you've got your delivery amount, your rounding return amount, etc., custodian details, and on the right hand side here you've got your notification resolution times, things like that. But these are just small extracts from many different versions of CSAs that we have, but it's just to demonstrate to you what this data, structured data, looks like.
Great. Well, I love how we put together this, especially 2 slides back, about how the CDM can really help empower a contract lifecycle management strategy. And while Vernon mentioned ISDA Create, that's for new documents, there's still so many, whether it's tens or hundreds or thousands of legacy documents. So now, Paul, you're going to take us through that scenario with a demo of how a legacy document can use your technology and then results in CDM output, right? Is that the right way to describe it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Amy.
Okay.
So this is ARC51. So this is our digital document repository and data analysis sort of tool. And everyone I think understands the inherent value that comes with data inside legal agreements. I think everyone has very quickly gone over that and sort of decided that yes, there's definitely a lot of data in there, and more data is typically better, and that using that data is something that we should all be trying to do a little bit more of. One of the huge hurdles to get over is to actually work out the best way of getting that data from a PDF format, getting it from a bunch of files in a hard drive somewhere, and doing something with it to turn it into digestible and sort of manipulating the data to see what the bigger picture is and to ask the bigger questions. And the CDM as a concept is a brilliant one. There is a huge inherent problem that if your data, your existing agreements are in a PDF somewhere, translating that information into a CDM format, it's going to take a lot of time, it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's probably, because of the time and the effort, going to cost you quite a lot of money to do. And this is kind of where we think that ARC51 sits in very nicely. So we have built ARC51 to be a digital extraction tool, so it can take your documents and it can pull the data from them. We've also built it so that it can actually do a little bit more with the data than you'd like. We are, DRS is a legal firm. We've got our experts, we've got guys who've been working in the system for 20 plus years. They know the questions and they know the way that we need to be working. And because of that, we can get the data out, but then we can do things with it, which is the bit that's that ARC51, I think, is very, very interesting and cool for. I won't touch on everything that we do because I probably don't have time. If people would like to see more, obviously reach out and please do get in touch. But the platform is very comprehensive in terms of what it covers. So I will get onto the CDM, I do promise. Before I jump into that, we've got a bunch of different bits and pieces that we handle. So we do opinion summaries. I won't go into showing you what one looks like, but I'm sure if you're familiar with ISDA, you understand that this is something that happens quite often, that you need to see what the opinion says without reading the 200 odd pages of it. We provide opinion summaries that allow users to come in and see what our legal experts have pulled from the opinion summary as it stands. We have an area for playbooks. So if you're a firm and you have a particular playbook a particular play you follow when you're negotiating an ISDA master agreement, we've got an area for those to be stored in, fully auditable and following the different paths. We've got a DORA module. I won't go into that particularly. We've got a clause library. Similarly, I won't show that, but we store a lot of data that's pertinent to how legal agreements work, the life cycle that they live, and where things go. We also publish quite a lot of negotiation guides. So we actually host these in ARC51 as well. So all of these different negotiation guides that we publish, they are free to access and to use full stop anyway, but they're there and they're available to be seen. Bit of a whistle stop of the different bits and pieces that it handles. I know we're interested in documents today. And there are a few things that once you've digitized the data you can do with, that I am going to just quickly show you. I should caveat, our documents are all this sort of bit of a document, all of it's dummy data. So I haven't got anything in here. No one's confidentiality is being breached. I know that I've got hundreds of thousands of documents and I need to find one quickly. It's a nightmare to solve at the moment. What I can do is our system readily puts in a bit of a searchable format of PDFs and of the documents you upload. You can see Ronald McDonald isn't going to really be a key person inside any of these contracts, so you can see it's all dummy data. Immediately I know, if I know Ronald McDonald's inside my ISDA that I'm looking for, then it's giving me the two different areas that they are in. Even if I didn't want to read both of them, I can say, right, okay, actually, I also know that this one particularly involves Maine with cheese. And search, and there I've managed to narrow down by using keywords. And I understand that obviously the more documents you have, the more hits you might get. You can very quickly go through and go, this is where my document is. You can then go in and preview the document. It'll bring out the actual document for you to have a quick look at. You can open it and look at the data map, which I'm going to get to. So we have searching, we have reporting. I won't bother generating a report, but that's to get any of our data into an Excel format rather than into a CDM format. We can also export it in any way, shape, or form that's required. The analytics is something that I do think is particularly cool and interesting. So it's not just about learning what the data is inside your documents is and getting it out. It's also important to be able to do things with it. So one of the big things that we have worked hard to do is to have a look at going, what would people typically want to know inside their documents, and effectively mapping that to what's a risk, where are my documents at risk and where are the problems it could be. I won't go into everything with it. You can see that our documents are fairly desirable, but I can go into the agreement type. So I can go into an ISDA, I can have a look, an ISDA master agreement, I can check the governing law. And I can see very quickly that actually I have two fairly risky contracts in my portfolio. One of them has the governing law of Nigeria, one of them has Germany. I have said I don't want that, so that's giving me some kind of a risk. Should I go away and have a look at that? That's what we can do with the data. And that's what we have built to kind of actually sort of go further than just what's like, let's get the data in digital format. Obviously, one of the big things, one of the biggest problems to get past is how do you actually get the data from the PDF format into a working digital representation? And this is where we use AI. So we have an artificial intelligence pipeline, and I'm actually going to do one live right now for you to show you what it looks like. So as
Can
I
you do
say,
a drum roll?
yeah, really consider so I'm going to go and find my document. So I'm uploading a VMCSA, and there's a reason I'm doing that. We're obviously talking about the CDM. I am going to complete the document details with AI. I'm going to hit upload. What this is doing is it's sending away that document to our pipeline. The first thing it's going to do is make it searchable, which I've just showed you with the Ronald McDonald Maine McCheese stuff. Then it goes and asks it some initial questions. You can see how quick it is because it's already finished and I was halfway through my spiel. So what it's done is it's asked the initial questions to go, what would you ask someone if you were giving them the document straight away? And what you would be asking them is, what type of document is this? Who's party A? Who's party B? When's it dated as of? The information, the kind of metadata that's true, like that applies for any kind of contract you would put in. You get a bit of a disclaimer to say it's AI populated, because obviously you do need someone to check it over. But you can see that we've passed it through our AI algorithm. It's identified as 2016 English Law BMCSA. I know what it is. It's identified that Party A and Party B are Banco Bradesco SA and National Bank of Samoa. Again, these are real entities, and there's a reason for this, which I'll show when we get the CDM representation. And indeed, they are there. It's identified that the date of execution dated as of date is the 1st of March 2017. I'm going to put in scheduled start and end pages, which is important for when we actually get round to the next part of it. And I hit complete. So great, it's worked out what it is, but there's still an awful lot of data in there. We then send it back through our pipeline again, this time with the extra data that we already know. So we know this is a BMCSA. So we configured the AI to effectively look at and say, okay, if I know this is a BMCSA, what data am I most interested in finding out? What are kind of the key questions that someone would ask? You can see we've got this little notification up. It's already finished that extensive AI data extraction. So I can click and take a look. This is our data map view. And on the left-hand side, you can see I've got the BMCSA with all of the different bits and pieces. On the right-hand side, having not done anything more than what I've just been explaining to you in a live demo, we have pulled out a bunch of answers and a bunch of information that stands in terms of where it wants to go. So what is the base currency? It's euro. Pound sterling is an eligible currency. I can see on the left-hand side that's true. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see that this is what a user would be doing. They'd be going in and saying, okay, I need to quickly have one quick check to make sure that everything works out as it's supposed to. If I look at the minimum transfer amount, which is down here, you can see that it's pulled out that it's, with respect to Party A, 50,000 units of the base currency. So it's smart enough to go, it's 50,000 for the minimum transfer amount, and the base currency, it's cross-corroborated that to go, the base currency was euro, so I know the minimum transfer amount is euro. We pull out a bunch of information, and sometimes it hasn't found information, or it's saying, no, it's not applicable, so it puts it in not applicable. Hit confirm and save. And that's our initial pass and our initial data extraction done. We've got, you can see there's an absolute abundance of sections here. So there are some bits that are very complicated. And we are working on this as very much a continuing project to pull more data out of it as we enhance the AI pipeline that we've got. But we can currently pull out, as you saw there, about 30 points of data, which we think are the most pertinent ones, which you'd want to pull out straight away. We're obviously chatting about the CDM. This is all about kind of what we can do with the data. We've got the analysis stuff on our side, but we've also added in a live sort of production thing to let you go export to CDM. And here it is. Here is the representation. So in the space of time that I've been talking, well, probably less because of the fact that I kind of had to fill in a little bit while I was explaining more and just pausing. We've now got a CDM representation of this BMCSA that we've just uploaded. So we've gone from a PDF with nothing to a CDM representation of that data. Now, if you want to pass that down to collateral, sort of a collateral engine somewhere, if you want to just extract it to put it into your own system that you've worked out and how to map it to your own kind of thing, you can use Arca 51 to do this in a matter of minutes to pull everything out. The reason we use Banco Bradesco and National Bank of Samoa is because they do actually have an LEI identifier. So we pulled that information and put that in the right place. And then if I go a bit further down, you've got your base currency, eligible currency. We had the minimum transfer amounts. We kind of pointed at that, and that's put in the value of 50,000 euros for Party 1, 50,000 euros for Party 2. It's all the way through. It's a very comprehensive kind of mapping, and that's what we can do. You can either just view it if you want to have a quick look at what it looks like. You can hit download. That gets you the JSON, which you can then use to pass to wherever it is that you want it to go. And I think that's about it in terms of what I was hoping to show you. I hope that everyone's suitably impressed by the fact that we've managed to get all of the AI out and that we have only really been watching me scroll and press. I haven't actually had to type anything in, and I've now got a CDM representation of the VMCSA. Amy, I'll pass back over to you.
I think it's very exciting, and I do appreciate that you set up the demo to review how the data can be used. So not only in the use case of pulling the data into a collateral management system, whether it's when you're switching from one system to another or wanting to add in more information or amendments or so forth, but also that you can use that data to search for things. Not just Ronald McDonald and Mayor McCheese, but I can picture, nav triggers or downgrade triggers, or, if you're looking to make any changes across the board to your MTAs, looking at all of the agreements in one place. So you really got me kind of even more excited than when I was planning this of, things that I wish I had, say, 10 or 15 years ago that would have made my life much easier. So, times have changed, but it's pretty exciting going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the next. We've got a few big things in our pipeline at the moment, but one of the real big ones that we're excited about is to combine the opinion summary data that DRS produce and to combine that with our own legal knowledge and with the AI sort of technology to effectively provide a netting engine for looking at if netting applies based on the particular contract that you're doing, of a trade that you're doing in whichever product it is that you're wanting to trade, be that theoretical or be that via an existing agreement. Which obviously, again, it's all driven by having the data in the system, and the AI functionality that we have is one that lets you really get over that hurdle at speed and at quite a very sort of, we think, very cost efficient way of doing it.
And I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit in our notes. Now you demoed the 2016 VMCSA, correct? I mean, it's one document, but Vernon had mentioned that there's many others that are available in ISDA Create, and also many others that are available that have been translated into CDM. What do you have next that's specific to CDM? This isn't a one and done project, is it, Paul?
No, it's absolutely not. So I am really excited to announce that actually our IMCSA is now live. There is, so if you ingest an IMCSA, we haven't got the AI pipeline quite set up yet. It's still going through the kinks and making sure that we're okay with the user acceptance testing side of that. But we have provided, I would say, about 85 to 90% of the mapping required to get an IMCSA into a CDM format. The reason I haven't demoed that today is that we haven't got any IMCSAs in our system. I don't have any demo ones to put into the to add data in for manually. But if you were to upload an IMCSA and manually add the data in, we can actually export that now to a CDM model as well. We are looking at sort of legacy. We're looking at mapping effectively every single type of CSA that we can do. The other big sort of factor this and big sort of factor is that, and I'm kind of probably stepping on Vernon's toes here, is that this really does need to be a bit of a community-driven project. And we are actively working with, and we're going to be working inside the working groups moving forward. We would really like there to be a similar level of representation for an ISDA master agreement, for example. So we are planning on working closely to get that representation done and dusted so that we can keep on making it easier to move data from one system to another.
Well, I don't think Vernon would ever mind in you helping with the cheerleading of joining the working groups. And I know, Vernon, you have a couple of slides, or at least I think one slide, of how firms can learn more about the CDM and getting involved.
Sure, I'm just going to bring that up now. Thank you, Amy. That's a good segue into this particular topic. So you're probably thinking about different things of how you can get involved if you're interested. Now we have a number of ways to do so. We have a CDM collateral working group. We have an ISDA CDM legal agreement working group. Now those are focused on developing the CDM further, developing more use cases and understanding current use cases. And both of these groups normally run on a monthly basis. on the ISDA CDM legal agreement working group, we are working towards completing the 94-95 legacy CSA. Currently, in the CDM collateral working group, we're looking at extending the eligible collateral side of the model, so the eligible collateral schedules and the components and terms within them. So lots of areas going on, and there are other use cases outside of documentation, such as margin call data, cash collateral interest processing, and so on. And obviously, if you have areas of interest that you think the CDM could help with standardization, please let us know what they are. I mean, currently we're starting to look at the substitutions process, so more to come on that in future months and into next year. But on these particular slides will be shared as a PDF to everyone who's registered for this webinar after the event. And there's also a CDM collateral startup guide. On the next slide, there is a QR code that takes you directly to that. Now, this particular guide we developed early this year because we recognized that people didn't know where to start, how to get their head around CDM, what is it, how do you access certain things, what are the collateral use cases. So we developed this quite involved guide that covers 6 different modules, starting very easy, introducing you to the CDM, going on to how to access it, and then how it works, how you can download it, how you can use it. And then it digs into the specific collateral use cases and how they can be implemented. So we'll send a link to that as well as sending this information with the QR code where you can access that on the ISDA website. And we recently run a training event at the ISDA offices alongside ISLA. So it was a joint trade association event, 2-day training course going through this collateral startup guide, and we possibly will be running that again in the future. So there's plenty of opportunities to become involved and be part of this journey if you're interested in what you heard today, which is one of the use cases, but there's many more collateral related and beyond. And just as part of this, there's an appendix that kind of shows you what's in this particular Get Started for CDM collateral guide. So what's in the introduction, how to access it. So it breaks it down a little bit further for you so you can see what the content is. And then within this appendix that I'll share that people can look at in a bit more detail in their own time is just a few extracts from the guide itself that goes through what the guide tells you and how it explains the CDM and how it breaks it down for you to better understand the model. So I'll leave it there. Back to Amy.
Thank you, Vernon. And Paul attended the workshop, which frankly, Paul, when I saw that you signed up, I was like, he already has something in production. What more can he learn? But from what I'm gathering, maybe you picked up a few more tidbits during the workshop from the startup guide.
Yes, absolutely. It's so I had a brief pass over the startup guides before they were finalized and released, and had a little bit of a help in getting those written as well. Getting everyone and chatting about the CDM it's important to sort of note these kind of things. It's important to keep doing it even if you do know what you're doing, to try and make sure that you continue to understand it a little bit better. So it was very, very useful to be at the 2-day workshop, and if they do another one, I'll probably go again.
Oh, wow.
If only to enjoy the pub at the end of the day on the first.
You never know. Vernon and Chris Rayner from ISLA might have you teach part of it even.
Yeah, well.
So we have a few questions that came in, and if you're, thinking about asking a question, please send it into the Q&A chat. For Paul, we have 2 questions for you specifically. How long did it take you to implement? I mean, you mentioned that you started thinking about, participating in working groups a couple of years ago, but really from start to finish, how long did it take you to get to your first finish line, or your first milestone, I should say?
Yeah, so we decided after the CDM workshop, or the CDM conference, which was January or February of this year.
February, yeah.
February of this year. We decided after that we definitely need to make a move on this. We had to do a little bit of internal planning on our part before we could get started. We are quite a small team, so the mapping really fell to me to do. Doing the mapping, we got from a starter for nothing to having a VM CSA live and in production. I think we announced that in, I'm going to say July. It might have been even sooner than that. So you can go, if you've got someone who's got the sort of a technical mindset, the technical know-how to actually dive into the code, and obviously the how-to guides that have been released really do help you kind of get that little bit of a head start on that as well. I think that realistically you could have a production-ready example, a production-ready sort of first case in the space of, call it half a year, just to be safe in terms of the work. And that wasn't obviously all I was doing Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But I suppose that a realistic scenario, you'd be looking at between 3 and 6 months, I guess.
Okay. And another question for you is, does your AI read the GIMRA agreement?
Yes, it does. So it also I wouldn't be able to give you an absolute comprehensive list because we are adding things to it all the time. A perfect example is that we are in the middle of working through ISDA right now, but I know we do account control agreements. I know we do VMCSAs. I know we do GIMRAs, GIMSLAs, and ISDA master agreements as well. So there will
But
definitely
the AI tool can read them, but you don't yet have CDM output for all of them yet.
No, we don't. So we are still looking at the various different bits and pieces with it. I know that I've been having conversations with Chris Rayner at ISLA about the GIMSLA representation, which is potentially going to be changing a little bit. I won't step on his toes and sort of announce things that he maybe doesn't want to talk about yet. But the GIMRA can be extracted using AI, absolutely no bother. You can use your own sort of reporting concept to export it to an Excel spreadsheet. As of right now, we wouldn't be able to do anything more than simply put out an export to CDM, which would give you the very top level metadata side of things, who party A, who party B was, what the agreement was. We don't have anything for the elections inside.
And Paul, you bring up the way you describe it. I mean, ISLA and ICMA have been involved in the collateral roadmap more recently. When we greatly appreciate their collaboration. I know Vernon spends quite a bit of time with both of them, and they might just not be as far along on the CDM journey when it comes to documents. So, but we know that they're coming along. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to say not only that your AI tool, but how they have CDM output as well. I think this question is more for Vernon. Will you cover eligible collateral and concentration limits at some point? And from a CDM perspective, some point is we already have some of that. So would you like
Yes.
to dive into that a bit?
Yeah, we do have quite a large structure built in the CDM for representing collateral terms used in eligible collateral schedules that include how to represent different types of assets, the issues of collateral, along with haircuts, treatment rules, concentration limits, maturity profiles. So, and that covers most products that you'd normally see in schedules across the different markets, not just OTC derivatives, but securities lending and repo. So if that is an area of interest, please reach out to us, and I can also do a follow-up deep dive on that side of the model if you wanted to see that.
Great. And a couple of other questions. How many firms are implementing? We know that DRS has an ARC 51 or Parallel 51 has the ARC 51 offering. And earlier in the summer, Vermeg's Colleen system announced their production ready use case. They're not the only ones, Vernon, right? There's more coming.
Yeah, they're the only ones actually in production, but there's probably around another 10 to 12 firms that are actively working on implementations and are quite advanced in those. And that's both on the eligible collateral use case and the documentation use case. So we're hoping that possibly another one of those could be announced this year, and certainly more into next year. And that spans across custodians, vendors, and other service providers. So yeah, you know, there is quite a lot of activity. We do have a standard deck that some of you may have seen. If you join our working groups, or we've spoken to in the past, that covers all those firms that we're working with. But we can share those. We're open to share those with those that are interested.
Yes, and if you haven't seen the standard deck and presentation from Vernon or me, you know, feel free to let us know because we'll be happy to do that. And a good something to emphasize is that our focus has been with technology providers like DRS and Parallel 51 and infrastructure providers. Not necessarily just end users, because we appreciate that in the collateral ecosystem, it's very much driven by the technology providers and firms like tri-parties, and that has been our focus. But if you're an end user, and you have your own system, or if you want to know if your technology provider is in our pipeline, we are not shy at all, right, Vernon? We are not shy when it comes to sharing that information. We already went over the information about joining the working groups, so that was a question. And then also, are there currently, Vernon, what's next? What's coming in the future? I know you mentioned substitutions. Is there anything else that's, and Paul mentioned master agreements, which is not collateral specific, but our legal friends will be working on that. Anything else that you want to mention, or do you want to keep it top secret so we can, we're not usually top secret though.
No, not at all. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we are working on extending the model for the 94, 95 legacy CSA. So if that's of interest to you, that work should be completed by the end of the year. And then we'll start to build test pack information to help those that are mapping to it to validate their mappings and kind of bring that to production. Alongside the eligible collateral model that is always evolving. I mean, we're currently working on some extensions with a working group covering areas of different asset types, how we handle different terms within eligible collateral schedules. So I think that work will be ongoing. And we're also already getting, interest from, for example, exchange traded world where, firms are interested in using that same model in how they share information with their clients and CCPs. So when we kind of start to get other markets looking at the model, we might need to extend it in certain areas. So that, I think that work will be ongoing. I mean, we do have a very good foundational structure for representing most terms. We mentioned the substitution workflow. CDM potentially can help in there, but I think it's a growing data model. So if there are ever other areas that you could be interested in, please let us know, and we can certainly look at them. And a lot of CDM structures could be in place already, and it'd just be a case of putting them together into workflows to assist with any areas you need to improve.
That's right. So just like Vernon and I aren't shy about talking about the CDM, we don't want any of you listening either live or in the recording to be shy about giving us ideas, because you might be one of many who would have that suggestion. So I don't think we have any more questions. Oh, wait, we do have a couple of questions coming in. But we're not sure if they're content related. So I will get back to that individual after the webinar. And I have seen, I get notifications when the startup guide has been downloaded. So Vernon, we've already got a few more people that have downloaded. Sorry, we have one more question that has come in. Can AI recognize if there are any special clauses included in the ISDA master agreement? So that's for Paul, if you wish to answer that, or if it's a very specific question, we can give you the contact person's name if you'd like.
It might be better to do that. I suppose the long and short of it is that AI can pretty much do whatever it is that you want it to do. Our implementation of it can certainly answer a lot of complicated questions when it comes to sort of mapping the stuff across. If it's a very, very specific clause and it's something that's off the wall and hasn't been seen before, then that's something that might need a little bit more work doing to it, particularly in our system. But yes, if you don't mind, Amy, sharing that, I'll reach out separately.
We will. And one last question, which is there a fee in signing up for the CDM, and what's the cost? So the short answer is there is not a fee. It's an open source data model. There are two components related to collateral, one that's within Finos and one that is within ISDA Foundations for ISDA members. You may encounter some fees if you need how would you say it, Vernon, with extra access for usability. But if you are to use what's called the GitHub, there is no fee involved. So we'll include a little bit of information on that as a follow-up as well. But as an open source data model, there's no direct fees with CDM. But we appreciate there's resources involved, right, Paul? It's not, you've got to invest some time and energy for sure.
Yeah, to be honest, I think that if someone could turn around and say, we have taken the CDM and we've built something that will sort of take your data no matter what it looks like and put it into a CDM representation, they'd be printing money, and that'd be a very expensive thing to pay for anyway. So if you're wanting to map to the CDM, it's available on GitHub. As you've said, it is available to be downloaded and looked at. That's the CDM core. The ISDA Foundations is limited to ISDA members, but really it's more the time sink that it takes to understand how it's going and then build your own mapper to go your data into it or from it to what your data wants to look like for the analysis.
You said it better than me. Thank you. Well, Paul, thank you very much for demonstrating ARC 51 and for investing your time, not only for the webinar, but in using the common domain model to date. And we look forward to more of your involvement and contributions going forward. And Vernon, of course, always thank you very much for giving the overview of CDM. If anyone has any further questions, you can contact Vernon or me through collateral.initiatives@isda.org. And if you have a question for Paul, we can pass it on to him. We can certainly do that. So thank you all for joining.